Volume 10, A Black Hole Heart. Suthar was alone again. He knew he was dreaming. His worst nightmares surrounded him, leaving no doubt. The road's stone bricks were his sister's limbs, the leaves were replaced by the heads of the quadruplets, and the statues wore Kalia's head like a necklace. The temple loomed above him like a god towering over a sacrifice. Before it stood something no god could redeem. It had thousands of screaming faces stitched together, all moaning in unison, pleading for death. His sister, his mother, and his father. And him. Its skin was translucent and slimy, like a deep-sea creature that should have remained buried beneath hell. Things writhed beneath its surface, twitching, squirming, as if it had swallowed its own thoughts, now struggling to escape. Instead of a head, it bore a maw of regret. Limbs clawed from within, only to be consumed. Suthar couldn't move. This was paralysis he couldn't will his way out of. The maw's finger twitched with anticipation, waiting for him to flinch. They stood, one waiting, the other trying not to piss or shit himself. Eventually, the maw lost patience. It dragged itself forward on massive arms ending in bloated baby heads, dozens of them, twitching and grasping at the air like they were searching for something to hold on to. Its breath reeked of rot and shredded dreams. Each movement played a xylophone of corpses. As it approached, its pace quickened, from a crawl to a sprint. Then it was too fast to follow. It reappeared above Suthar like a sun crashing to earth. In its hand, a jagged instrument crafted from a twisted spinal column, as though ripped out, forcefully straightened, and strung with twitching nerve fibers. When strummed, the strings played a melody not even the devil's violin could match. Suthar didn't move. The glyphs that once empowered him were silent. The will that brought him back to life was already dead. In a final, desperate attempt, he curled into a ball, praying his skin would hold. The maw came crashing down. But the instrument never struck. Suthar uncurled, placing himself into the maw's hand. He looked up and met its eyes. The maw hung in the air, smiling like a predator before the first bite, slow, inevitable, and impossibly wide. From behind him, the maw's instrument stabbed up through the ground. It pierced his chest and played a song, a symphony of undoing. Each note was laced with the cries of screaming infants and harmonized with women begging for mercy. The world convulsed, as if trying to vomit up reality itself. The instrument split into tentacles that spread through Suthar's body. They halted his blood flow and ruptured his veins. Vines bloomed from his fingertips and toes, turning him into a puppet. The strings kept growing, reconnecting with the maw. It was clear Suthar was being toyed with, only to be discarded. His eyes flickered red, not with power but with blood. Tentacles forced their way from his eye sockets. His glyphs glowed green, or so it seemed. In truth, the vines were simply engulfing them. The maw shrieked with glee like a toddler with a new toy. Suthar screamed, not from pain but from something deeper. 523, he shouted. The air thickened, turning to screaming tar. The temple cracked, not from force, but because it couldn't coexist with what was coming. The maw's limbs twitched with ecstatic agony, as if birthing its own demise. Suthar's spine arched unnaturally. Wings of shattered mirrors burst from his back, each pane reflecting a different death. 524, 525, 526. His voice cracked, not with pain, but with remembrance. Each number marked an alternate reality where he died at that exact moment. The maw's grin became a circle. It looked to the sun and screamed, not a blood-curdling cry, but something worse. It was the echo of Suthar's soul, once defiant, now a requiem. His glyphs didn't ignite, they wept. And from the center of surrender, something tried to rise, but failed. The maw crushed him like an insect too weak to be called an ant. Suthar's body was left mangled, in a worse state than the guards he'd killed. The wound in his chest widened. The pain spiraled endlessly, devouring itself. Then it stopped, not from mercy, but because it became a black hole. His cells collapsed. Survival was no longer an option. Reversal's wound, the world whispered. From the black hole, spirits poured out, each chanting, Reversal's wound. They rushed the maw, clinging to its power source. Suthar began to rise, forcing the maw's foot off him. Reversal's wound, he echoed. His body became hollow, a cathedral of black marrow. His bones turned to pillars shimmering with rotted light. His ears became cysts of despair. His spine ripped free, sprouting tendrils of black marrow. His heart became the black hole. Time reversed. The vines retreated from his body. The maw was lifted into the air. Suthar's skin turned to obsidian glass. The maw did not wait. It attacked not to kill, but to peel. It ripped time and reality like wet wallpaper, taking Suthar's skin with it. The world flickered from a ruined temple to a child's playground. This was no longer a dream, but a reality. Giant stuffed animals lined the padded walls. The maw was gone. No, this was the maw. Suthar looked to his left, only to be met with a backhand that knocked him to the ground. A tall, blue, fuzzy toy with a wide smile picked Suthar up by the leg, dislocating it. It shook him before throwing him into the air. From below, another toy revealed itself, not by emerging, but by unfolding. Its body was trapped in a box lined with bloodied shapes. Its jaw creaked shut like a rusty door, taking Suthar's leg with it. Its voice wasn't a growl. It was the screams of those it had killed within an hour. The playground lights flickered like they couldn't decide whether to offer safety or hunger. Suthar dangled midair. The blood from his leg dripped into the box's mouth. The lights flickered again, and he was back in front of the temple. He still dangled in the air, held up by the spirits trying to escape the maw's jaws. Suthar was thrown higher into the air, his arm ripped off by the spirits. With a brutal kick, the maw sent him into a pillar, causing the temple to collapse onto him. The rubble devoured him, becoming a tombstone for a rotted god. Suthar didn't twitch, didn't breathe, and didn't survive. The world began to shake, not from awakening, but from being devoured. The ground ripped apart, boulders flew across the sky, disturbing the aurora solaroid. Suthar rose, not like a hero, but like a memory the world tried to bury. And now the grave sang with him. His body was carved obsidian, polished yet cracked, revealing flickers of candlelight and whispering glyphs beneath the skin, not written on it. They shifted constantly, like they were trying to escape. The wound where the maw's instrument pierced him remained a gaping hole, but it did not bleed. Instead, it sang, a faint hum of mourning that unnerved reality itself, leaking strands of hair, strings of voice, or ashes that never fell. The maw turned back, looking at the god's grave, now missing its god. The maw screamed, not in rage, but in fear. Suthar had become the only thing worse than the maw. A being with no attachments to his past or future, Suthar's survival was all that mattered. The awakened Zarn was reawakening. The maw tried to run, turning its back to Suthar. Faster than anyone could blink, the maw was now in Suthar's kingdom. Suthar sighed in disappointment, as if he'd expected more. For a maw of regret, you seem to regret your existence. The maw turned, meeting Suthar's gaze. The air froze. They stood, staring each other down, one trying not to piss or shit themselves, the other ready to kill. From the void that hummed in his chest, Suthar pulled a weapon not made of metal but of consequences. It was shaped like a blade but shimmered like broken promises. Every edge bore a way he could kill the maw. Every groove held a scream he should have let out but didn't. This was not a sword. It was remorse given form. The maw flinched, its form faltering. An illusion of a person's worst fear does not work against the fearless. The illusion failed. The only thing left was a scientist of the flowerbed church. The mirrored consequence sword still hummed in Suthar's hand. The reflections stopped and became one future, one death. He dropped the sword to the ground. As he crept closer, the world seemed to fall in on itself. Suthar grabbed the scientist by the jaw. With one swift tug, he ripped out the scientist's tongue, tonsils, and soul, killing him instantly. Suthar floated above the corpse. "You are not frightening, just merely disappointing," he whispered to himself.